All right then. Cool. Sweet. Here we go, finally. 8 minutes later. Yeah, if you could just fit 45 minutes into 30 minutes and you'll start 10 minutes later, that'd be great.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, you've seen this. Jesus. No?
There we go, that's better.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Right, cool. Luke asked me to start something off, so got a circle, and if you put two circles together, or a number of circles, then it starts to look a little bit like what's on the front of the little zine thing, right, that everyone's got. And if you apply a filter, an SVG filter on that, so what's actually happening here is I'm blurring the circles, and then the blurry bit, I apply a contrast filter, and then that gives me the edge, and it kind of looks like a splat, right? And I was trying to get a creative way of trying to do this, and I got Luke in my email saying, like, oh, can you make these blobs for us? Come on, need something in this zine. And I'm like, oh, God, I don't know if I've got the time. But then I was like, no, he's triggered me now. But you can't messing around with that, and then you think, right, it's just circles, and they're dispersed, and I animate them around a bit. You can start splats, right? And Luke literally asked me this just before we started. Oh, how did you make them 3D? Well, the cool thing is they're not 3D. That is a stroke around a circle that's blurred, and it makes it look 3D. Pretty cool, right?
Mind-blowing.
Check out the little zine. Yeah, sweet. One, Phil's taken score, so we're all good. All right, so this is, Supercharge Your Skills with Creative Coding. This is volume 4. This is the 4th time I've given this talk since May, but every time it changes. Each time the deck is different, so don't worry, you're not getting any recycled content. I am Jhey Tompkins. I'm a developer relations engineer at Google. That's enough about that. And I usually like to start with thinking about tinkering with something or changing something in a particular way. So I like to start with, the lowly input. We've seen it, right? I work a lot with form controls, just for the record. But you can change it, right? CSS gives you these interesting things. So accent color landed, and you're able to give accent to your form controls, and it's pretty clever. And if you map it, you could do red to green, and it changes, right? It goes white to dark. It works it all out for you, which is pretty cool. But what if you took the thumb away and, I don't know, you just turned it into EQ bars? And that's pretty cool, right? They're all inputs, and they all react to my voice, and they do their own sort of thing. And this is what I like to term as expression through the impractically practical, right? It's practical in the sense that I'm learning. Impractical, probably don't drop this on your production site anytime soon. Fine. But yeah, the idea is give yourself the confidence to create anything, and anything your imagination brings, go beyond the documentation and become it. And these two things kind of go hand in hand. The way you approach this, I just wanted to squeeze this in here really. Basically, you want to learn something, and it gives you a creative idea. You want to get creative, you want to learn something. So they just go hand in hand, and it just kind of waterfalls, which I didn't think of this until I was rehearsing this, which leads perfectly into this one. Every time I do this deck, I can't think of a good visualization for this, but the idea is that lots of perspectives and the web and the way we collaborate fuels creativity, which then fuels innovation, which then pushes the web platform further, and we see it. It's a cyclical thing, right? It just keeps going. Everyone's like, nah, I want scroll-linked animations. Spoiler, that's what's coming up. Let's put it in the browser. So that's how we go. But how do you do this? Well, just hoard all your inspiration and focus on what you're doing and not really the how or the why. In this context, why are you doing CSS art? I just want to learn layout. Probably, again, use a PNG. It's fine. SVG. Here are some random things I've made over time. Again, are any of them in production sites? I hope not. But they were fun. I learned a lot from them. The middle one, React, SVG animation. The left one, how to do path animation. The right one, 3D CSS stuff. And it's a personal journey. It's a process. It's something you train over time. You just keep doing it, and things keep happening. And with that, we're going to get to work. So I stripped a load of slides out to try and get through this quick. So just a heads up, we're experimenting with some of these things. Some of it, I will try and go over what's supported and what isn't, but if you've got any questions, just come and ask me and I'll tell you. There are spec links and things, I'm going to put them at the end, but we like to say we're experimenting so no one thinks this is concrete and we don't get in trouble. But we're going to start with something nice to warm up, which is CSS Has, which people have seen. Has anyone seen? Good. Which is almost there. We're just waiting for Firefox. Interesting fact, When I was doing an article for this for Chromium Dev, I found out that the Firefox issue for CSS has was opened 15 years ago, which is long before I knew what a CSS even is, or was, shall I say. Still don't know what it is. I had to squeeze Dom Toretto in. So it's more than just a parent selector, right? It's a family selector. You can go up to the side, you can go wherever you like. You don't just have to go up, which is nice. Well, it's pretty convenient, you're going to see. So the idea is you take a target, and that's what you want, and you have some target with a condition, and then you apply styles. Normally we go downwards. We're like, I don't know, body, main, background, style it there. But here we're saying, hey, if body has a main, then style the body, or something like that. Easily done here. So I've got the class everybody, and everybody has a good time, right? So the animation is party like it's 999 seconds. So, thanks Jeff at DigitalOcean, who then, I haven't spelled his name right, but Jeff has some distant aunt, so I can use a sibling combinator. And it's when we start thinking about it a bit differently. So CSS has here, Jeff has some distant aunt. Jeff at bottom is selected because even though there's something between them, he has an aunt in the distance. Cool. But you've got to break your mental model. You've got to flip it. You can go up, round, all over the place. So take a normal card. Nothing special here. Image, a blurb, let's say, and an author and a title. Now, usually, people will say, it's got an image, so we're going to do the classic change the grid layout, and that's normally what I would do. But instead, we're going to do something different today. We're just going to show it how you can use it something different. Instead, I'm going to take these things out. So what happens with my card when I take two things out? And I could do card not has a blurb and not has an author, and then change the aspect ratio. Or I could make it the image full width, and then I could add a linear gradient on the back. So I haven't actually changed the markup, apart from removing the two things. But using has, now I've got this aspect ratio card with a nice linear gradient that hopefully doesn't look too bad at the back. And the same thing again. Here I've got a feature, so this is the flip. This is the one I'm saying the card has a feature, so it's got this little feature ring, but I'm giving it a bigger box shadow and an obnoxious wiggle, which you probably don't want to put into production either. And also definitely wrap it in a prefers reduced motion. No pops for that, come on, accessibility. Come on. And yeah, same again, if I just remove those things, leave it in the same layout, now I've got a cool big card in with some little ones. Sweet. It's use cases for days. That's the main thing to take here. And you can just experiment with it and see what you can do with it. So I've got some interesting ones here, and that's the classic at the top. If I've got some image, change some grid layout. I'm changing the columns, or if it's got a feature, I could say, make it full width, grid column 1/-1. If it's some kind of, not an icon button at the third one, or like using state, area press true. So second example is forms. Take a normal form. You don't get much from it. You could just put something in here. You're going to get some validation, but there's no visual indication of what's actually happening here until I intervene. And I could do that because forms give us state. So we have when a placeholder is shown, when the focus is visible. But if a form group has an invalid, maybe I change a scoped color on that element, and then I can see it in action. So if I type, now it's yellow because there's focus. But if it's an error, now it's red because I said, you know, let's do a valid one. And now it's green. But there's no JavaScript at play here, no class names, nothing. It's just working on the state of the HTML, which is pretty damn impressive, I think. But you can take it further than that. So if you split up the characters and make it accessible, then you could do char indexes, throw it into some animation, and then when everything is valid, you'll see what happens in a second. Or you could show some kind of group error. So taking that further, if you error it out, obnoxious wiggle, and displaying an error. But if you get valid, and watch for the email label, Mexican wave. just little nice little micro interactions like that, but just powered through CSS. And it's pretty interesting. You can go a lot further with this. You could think of, if you did it with dark mode, you could flip a dark mode on the root, because you know that root has some theme toggle pressed true. Use arrow pressed, don't use a checkbox. And you could flip things, which is, again, pretty cool. And you could take that further. So here's a dark mode that's in use, but I've obviously added some extra bits to it. But it's all just powered by CSS, which is pretty interesting. So it's just a 3D block there, but I'm actually just changing some things on the root, and I'm doing some delays, and I'm flipping it around. You just got to get creative with it and try different things. This was another example. If you hover, classic hover, change your background color. Nothing too special, right? You know how to do that. You just do an li hover, change the background. But you could also select the previous thing to what is being hovered now, because you can say li has a sibling that is being hovered, then do that too, as well as the one after, because you can use a sibling combinator, which is also pretty interesting. So now I'm able to do things like this. And yeah, that looks great, but why am I doing that? Well, I've been thinking about this idea of putting easing curves into CSS somehow, and how I might get those values and use them. And that's what I'm doing here. So this is an easing curve I've taken. I think it's like a power or a sine curve or something. But the idea is I've got flex layout, and I'm just using calc with the lerp function on hover, and I'm saying when the next one is hovered, use that particular thing. It's easier just to look at it. But that's what it gives me. So I've got some ability here to do something with CSS, and no JavaScript intervention at all. And it looks pretty sweet, I think. And this is where it gets a bit crazy. So part of my role is trying to push things and see how they work. And when I was writing about has, I had to look at certain performance things and see how things work. And this one's a bit of a, I don't know, it's like one of those, when people really like crosswords or Sudoku or something, I like to sit and try and crunch selectors, which sounds really nerdy. But this calendar view, someone showed the markup, which is it's all tables, TRs, TDs. And inside I've got radio buttons. And this is all CSS, no JavaScript here, but I'm able to click one and select it. And I'm able to do the hover around. But that's all right. But then I can even do, see how I've got dash change? And this is all just no JavaScript, no class names, nothing. It's just raw markup and relying on form state. I can go and reset it, and it even works with my keyboard fine. Like it's pretty sweet. But then when we look at the rules, you'll be like, probably don't want to use that. So this is the markup, just radios, tables. There's obviously some things obfuscated. There are quite a few cells. But this is where it gets messy. So the top one's pretty obvious, right? Calendar cell has checked, right? I'm going to change some things on the calendar cell, which is fine. That makes sense. But where it gets interesting is when you're sitting in New York in the office and you're like, and it's 8 p.m. and you haven't gone home because you really want to work this out. And you're thinking, why is this calendar not working? I'm able to now use has to do state checks. So the second one, I mean, I should have really set these as quizzes or something, but calendar has from checked, but doesn't have the to checked, but has a calendar cell that's hovered. Then pick the table row that has the checked from, pick the one after that that has the hover, but then pick the calendar cell in that has a calendar cell after it that's hovered, and then set the background color. But it makes perfect sense. It's right there in the CSS, so it's fine. Write once, forget. And that just takes you down this further route, right? Then you're thinking games, and I always like trying to create games with things. So tic-tac-toe, we had a game of this, didn't we, in Bristol, Phil? And I didn't let you win. So I'm just not going to play with anyone today due to time. But there we go. It works. Only because I'm going to play you at the next game, Phil, because I know you're in the front row. So the markup here, I've got a cell. But interestingly here, I've got the checkboxes outside of it, because this was one of the limitations I found. So I'm able to do something here. I can do the board, and then I can check for the number of checks to work out a turn. And there's different ways you could do this, but I'm doing a z-index calc, and I'm flipping which labels are shown when I click. And then when based on combinations, and here I'm using sibling combinators, I'm saying has this checked and this checked and this checked, then I know that cross has won or naught has won. But that's what I was saying. The issue is they're outside. It's not where I want them. But this is when I found out you can't has, but you can has. Yep. So you can chain it. You could do your combos. You could do has something checked, has something checked, has something checked, which is fine. But you can't do has a thing checked that has something, that has, yeah, you get the idea. You can't do that, basically. You can't do the bottom one. But it got me thinking, what else can I do with just CSS? So then I made Connect 4, and this has been my torment for the last few months. Not that I've spent all my time on it, but I was just telling a story before I come up here. I was in San Francisco, and I needed to make this demo, and I didn't have a charger, and then it was a holiday, and I couldn't find it, and then I couldn't get this to work, and it was quite painful. And then I decided I'd rebuild it for this talk. But now it's bomb-proof. Now it actually works. So this is all just powered by has. Is someone going to win? No? Can we just show? There we go. Let's just show a winner. And again, it's just form controls. So there's just a reset. I'm hitting reset here. It starts the game again. These are just hovers. These are just labels. But it gave me a different way of looking at has this time, because I was thinking, right, this time I'm definitely putting the checkboxes inside the cell. But then I couldn't put the labels in the cell. I had to put the labels somewhere else because I needed it to be 3D and I needed it to work. So it was really interesting how trying to push the boundaries on these things kind of helps you learn the inner workings a bit. So for detecting a win, what I actually did was I added data attributes to all the cells, and I could work it out. So I could be like, does the column have P1 checked, P1 checked, P1 checked, and is it a column that has a sibling? Then I know that I can show the win at the end. And the way the labels work is horrible, but hat tip to Bence for this one. It's a counter with a font size, with a font change that changes the width of an after pseudo element that flips a label across. So if you imagine a container with an after, and then you got two labels like that, and when the after changes, it pushes the other one out the way. Disgusting. But really, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? I know, right? You're all wondering the same thing. So this was a workshop I did, and let's find out. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? The answer is not all of it. So that is lit. Sweet. But these animations, yes. These animations are powered by has. So I'm speaking emojis. I have like a little library of words and triggers. And then when I speak them, they go in. But because I can do a sibling, I can say, hey, look, if the cat has a fire after it, it's probably not going to be very happy. But if the wood has an axe after it, it can get chucked. And then I listen to the animation end, and then I can remove it. So if we've got an interim, I can say, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Lit cat. All right, cool. That's enough of has. This is where I've been spending a lot of my time, in OpenUI. So OpenUI, this is currently, there's a polyfill under work. It's in Canary behind a flag, but the idea is that, yep, pop-ups are pretty polarizing, right? Not everyone is into them. I haven't actually checked the images. I hope there's nothing lewd. But the goal of the OpenUI initiative is to make it easier for developers to make great user experiences. A great thing behind this is forms. So select menu, if anyone's heard of that one. Being able to style select. That's the big one, right? But another one is pop-ups, right? How do I get a thing above everything else? React, for the React kids out there, just do this, right? Z-index date.now. Fine, sorted. But there is a way to get something out there above everything else. It's called the top layer, right? The top layer, a place outside a document flow, a place where Z-index has no effect, where every element has a stylable backdrop. It's been around for ages. Have you ever done a full screen thing? You full screened a video. That is using the top layer. The top layer has been around for ages. There's a full screen spec that details this. And currently you can use a dialogue in a modal form to get in stuff up there. But the idea is with pop-up, you'll get stuff into the top layer above everything else without having to do all these weird hacks. And you can co-locate your elements where they're meant to be in the DOM and then promote them when you need to. So this is a pop-up. How exciting. But there is something pretty cool here. So we've been working on developer tooling for this. I bet it's not going to work now because it's inside the iframe. Do you know what? If you want to see it, just come and chat to me. But basically, in DevTools, we show the top layer, and you can click on the top layer and inspect what's actually in the stack in the layer, which is pretty interesting. But the cool thing about his is I can click off, and it goes, right? I can use escape. I can use various close signals. It's hidden by default. No JavaScript for any of that. No Z-index fighting. The light dismiss, which we're on about, is just escape key or click off or blur, and it will hide it for us. And that was all I needed. Just that. Pop-up toggle target, an ID, a div, and it pops it up. Nothing. That's it. You can use your keyboard. You can open it with however else you like. I don't know. But you don't need to use JavaScript. And the way it does the transition, I just listen for... I could just use the clicker, really. I've had it in my hand the whole time. You just check for the sudo, whether it's open. And then it will do the transition for you, and then it will promote it at the right time. The browser knows how to do it when and if it needs to. And the idea behind all these things with OpenUI is that better developer experience, hopefully, leads to less opportunity for poor user experience. The idea that if this is done right, then it could be better accessible, more accessible for people. A different example, a balloon. And off it goes. But it's the same idea, right? I'm using the open. I'm saying enter in, exit out. So, and the actual reason I showed this is because there are other attributes. You can explicitly hide or show. Just use the clicker. Come on. All right. And there are also different types. One of the things as well with that kind of goes hand in hand with the accessibility is the focus management. If there's something with autofocus, that will take the focus as something that's opened. So if you had an input and you put autofocus on it, you opened it, you'll be on that input. But there's three types. There's auto, which is the default. That enables nesting support. They don't have to be physically nested, but they're just nested by the ID refs within. You have hint, which is like tooltips, and manual, where it's very like use JavaScript or be explicit. Just going to be easier to show you some examples, really. But there is a JS API, and here it is in action. I'm mindful of time. Here's some balloons, and you can pop them, right? It's not a game, but it's kind of fun. But the idea is breathe new life into old friends. So I've been working a bit on playing with material design stuff because we're trying to do a CSS thing where you can drop it all in. And this is a little layout. So I've got a nav drawer. There's a nice backdrop over everything else. I click off, it closes. I do that, I exit. I can do it all with my keyboard, but no JavaScript. Again, it's just a pop-up. Something that was typically troublesome before, but that's all I need to do. I just do some custom properties, but you might notice, who's at the bottom? It's Has, right? Has pop-up open, then transform the body across. I'm trying to link these together, tell the story, right? Come on. But you don't just have to do pop-ups like the stereotypical pop-up. What if you did a custom cursor? So here, I've got a pop-up, but it's actually a canvas with a custom cursor. Because I know it'll always be above the rest of my document, I don't have to worry about it. I just drop it in the page and say that's the one that sits above. And the interesting thing with pop-ups, when they go in the top layer, whichever one is last in is the one on top. So if you add something new, so I'm adding here, someone let him in. The cursor goes above, right? So I say, listen with my JavaScript API, which we quickly glossed over. Desperate to see these slides. You just add that pop-up back on top, so it gets promoted again above it. Way easy to see with DevTools as well. But you don't just have to use pop-ups for pop-ups. What if it was a toasts thing? So you could just always have your toast drawer, sitting above. And now I've got these little cool folders or files or things that I could just move around and, brilliant, it didn't break today. That's good. All right. Or you could do a command palette, which doesn't want to work. We'll just go on then. But the idea was that I had a pop-up that opens with my keyboard control, and then they found the entrance. It was on the back. They were all knocking at the front. When I open it, it's got a list box that's another pop-up inside it that is then anchored to that one. But the amazing thing here is that, like, because we're doing this, it's taking so many of those choices and implementation details that I normally have to worry about out of the equation. I'm doing the light dismiss and the off, or the off click, if you want to call it that. But I'm not having to think about it. I'm just doing it. I'm just getting on with it. And you have to find out, right, if you can do screensavers with it. But it's cool, right? It just shows on a set time out here. It's just a pop-up that goes up. And now these just, it will cheer if it hits the corner, but I don't think we've got time to wait for it. But it's just a scale and a slide, right? It's kind of nice. This one I really like. So this is a pop-up here. It's just default open. It just sits there above all my content, and I can tab to it, open it, and notice how it tabs straight to the first one, autofocus, as I mentioned before. But what else could you throw in there? Yeah, that's right. Now I'm here. You can see me here, and I can see what I'm up to. Don't look too bad. Barbara did a good job. All right. But you can throw anything up there, and that's the idea. So just saying, again, that's my autofocus. That would have been my little pop-up toggle target to open the menu on the pop-up that's a button, because you can make anything a pop-up now. Just have to ignore the name and just don't think of it too weirdly. But what really got me onto pop-ups was I was thinking of portals originally. How could I do something and like jump through into another page? Now, I don't know if this is going to work. Always good to hear. Bear with. Right. Right. It is working. But can I actually get to the end? Sweet. So this is a pop-up, right? It's a pop-up. So when I started doing my gesture, which is really hard on a trackpad, which I found out last night, even though I made this quite a way before, I'm promoting a canvas into the top layer to show these particles, and then I'm showing a GIF, and that's a link. I'm not going to click it because I'm in full screen mode and I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't need the stress right now. But, but it's a pop-up, right? So it's fine. So you just keep opening them, and you keep going, and they keep going, and they keep going, and you've got some, yeah, you might recognize some of these. I don't know how you get to the end. Oh well. But yeah, I thought this one's briefly worth mentioning. I haven't really gone over tooltips. They are a type of pop-up, but this is a very experimental thing, CSS anchoring. I spoke about this at TPAC. This is, it is in draft, it is in a spec, but the idea is that when you want to tether something to something else, it's notoriously difficult, and you end up reaching for all these kind of JS libs, and you don't know which one to use because the same guy makes them all, and he doesn't tell you which one, and it gets really confusing. I found this out when I researched it. So, but the idea is, this is kind of what the syntax might look like. So you'll be able to do something like this. You'd use positioning and that little anchor function. You'll define an anchor, and then you'll be able to use percentages alongside and be able to say like, hey, put my little boat on my anchor, but this is my position fallback. So if there's no space in my scroll port or my viewport, then try a different position. It's pretty freaking cool. But I haven't got a lot of time to go through it today. But you can do other cool things, like you can use the anchor positioning in calculations. So here I've got a bar chart, and I've actually got some, well, tooltips. They're not pop-ups because the other thing is this isn't quite in the top layer yet. But I can use it in a min-max. So I'm just moving these, and I'm actually saying whichever anchor has the highest value, move the max to that and the min to the lowest. But I'm not having to do any JS. It just works it all out for me. Obviously, I'm doing some JS to make the bars bigger, but smoke and mirrors, right? So, but this is a classic one. being able to do menus. And do you know what's really annoying? It was really hard to find any examples of these sorts of menus because I think they've gone out of fashion because they're so hard to implement. But the idea here is that I'm actually just tethering it with the anchor positioning, and as I move the viewport, it just updates it for me. It works it all out. I don't have to do anything. There's no weird nesting of DOM elements or anything. It just says, sweet, I'll just work that out for you. You don't worry about it. Again, better DX, better UX, hopefully. And on to the last piece. Right, scroll linked animations. This is, there's a polyfill for this, and it is kind of on the way. I don't remember the exact versions, but there will be a load of spec links and things, and you can come and grab me and chat about it. But the idea is you can do things like this. So these are image reveals powered by CSS. There is no JS at play here, apart from the polyfill. We're just smoke and mirrors, right? We're ignoring that today. But this will just be powered by CSS. Nothing crazy. It's just, yeah. And that's like, what? I normally have to pull out some other JS lib that someone's been maintaining for years to try and do something like this. But no, it will just be something like that. So the concept here is view timelines. And I'm saying my list item has a view timeline, and I give it a name, and I can give it an axis, horizontal or vertical. And then I'm tying that to the animation through the timeline. And then these phases, Dom Toretto is going to help us out in a minute with this. These tell us when to scrub the animation based on where something is in its side, its scroll port. Yes, this sounds incredibly awkward as I say it out loud, but when you work with it every day, it's fine. But you can use it in the JS API as well, right? So you can use this in the Web Animations API. That's kind of how it looks. The equivalent would be a constructor of a view timeline. And this is quite handy for when you want to create a lot of view timelines, like a loop, and you can set them all. Again, these are the different phases you can use. This should make, hopefully, a bit more sense as I go through these. Dom Toretto's here, Tokyo Scroll. Here we go. Right, so this again, this is just CSS, nothing at play here. When I come through, and these are my phases on the left, so I'm just scrolling this scroll port. And the idea is doing a scroll port is that it doesn't have to be on the body, it can be anywhere, right? So this is Brian's car. He's come at enter, so enter 0 to enter 50, right? He's 50% into the scroll port now. He's 100% into the scroll port. He's starting to cover the scroll port. He's contained within the scroll port. He's not exited yet, now he's exiting. So that should kind of make it clear what those phases kind of mean. Left to right is 0 to 100, just to be clear as well. And then if you want to bring Dom Toretto in, he just slides past in whatever car he's got. But yeah, that's how the phasing works. But it's important to mention that this is about scrubbing animations. It's not about triggering them. For something like that, intersection observer is probably still the right thing at the moment. But there is something coming down the line that hopefully you'll be able to trigger them. This is so much better with audio. I do have an audio version if anyone wants to see it. It's pretty fun. But you'll be able to do all these kind of like Apple-y, parallaxy kind of scrolly telling things as well. So this is a box. It's pretty interesting. Yep, 4 sides. Change the color. Oh, you could change the shape as well. Yeah, there you go. But the idea here is that it works really well with scroll snap, which kind of gives you that nice, so these are all scroll snapped sections, but it's nice because I'm just saying, cool, go off, and it will just take me to the next bit, and it works really well hand in hand with that. Here's another idea, parallaxing. So I've got these list items, backdrops, I'm just scrolling, but the backdrops are doing their own thing based on what the front drops are doing. So my backdrops are where I'm transitioning things, but the content is where I'm defining my view timelines. And the little scroll trigger thing, the scroll progress thing in the top right is just based on CSS. It's saying, hey, where's that last slide, right? So where's that last piece of content? And I could use something like enter -300 because I know that all of these are 100% and about 5 down is going to be -300. So I could be like enter -300 is when I want it to start, and then when it's entered fully is when I want it to stop, and that will show me the scroll progress of the page. the reason I bring that up is because there is another thing on the way. Again, this is all experiments, but the polyfill does work and it's constantly updated, so do check it out. But the scroll function will come, which will be able to tell you, hey, I want to hook onto the scroll of the nearest thing, or the root, or some defined thing. And yeah, this is what I was alluding to earlier. If you wanted to create loads, you could loop over them, and then just create a bunch of timelines, and then hook them onto your animations. Again, any questions, come and ask me. But the other idea here is to think in space. It's kind of a weird thing. I've worked on a lot of scrolling things before, but here I've got the same kind of concept. I'm scrolling through, but now the direction has changed, but I'm still scrolling down, but I'm doing a transition that goes across because I'm just listening to the view timeline of whatever's physically vertical, and I'm scroll snapping, but I'm just saying, hey, move my thing across, and then go down. But it works pretty nice, I'd say. And then you can do sort of these little micro interactions. So here I've got a search bar that just morphs in, and then I get a box shadow on a header. Again, no JS at play on this, it'll just be CSS. Is that my time up? But we're nearly there. Same again, avatars, and I had to throw this in. Because it's a pop-up, right? It's a pop-up, it's above all my other content, which is kind of cool. But then, if you think about it, with scroll snap, you could actually have something that's not snappable at the top, and now I can do this little like SVG filters from earlier, all right? And I've got a pull to refresh that comes out of the island, but it will snap back because of scroll snap. And I could just hook a little JS on the end to say when that hits that threshold, do my thing. Sweet. And this brings us on to this one, right? Whenever something new comes out, I like to try and recreate this. I did it with container queries. So I've done it with scroll timeline, just for all of you. So here it is. As I scroll the body, well, scroll some trigger, then update some value or some animation within, and scrub something else. So as I do it, my blinds go up. And Peter comes in. And some guy wants to get in from outside. But it just works on being scrubbed with the scroll port. It's pretty impressive, right? But a cool thing with this one, when I was playing with this, is all the blinds are individual pieces, but because you can scope a custom property inside a keyframe animation, and it will work, you'll get a dynamic behavior based on whatever the property is. If you do a to or something, or a from, you're able to scroll it, and all the blinds will go into their own position, because I'm using the index. And all I'm doing is I'm changing from 0 to 1 and using my timeline trigger, and I'm scrubbing it. I'm using DOM's phases, enter and enter, and it just works. It's pretty special. And this is the last example. This is something I built a few years ago for GreenSock release. I was fortunate to be given access to it, and I built this scrolly book. And these are all demos. These are all clickable things that I've made, and you can play with it. But I've been given the creative free rein at work to come up with something, and I wanted to recreate it with scroll linking. So I have, and this is the debug mode, but it's a book, right? So I can use horizontal scrolling, but I've got these scroll snap sections, which link to page turns, which is pretty cool. And the teaser is that next week, my first Google project will hopefully be coming out, which is for Chrometober. And the idea was I had creative free rein on it, and we've all worked together and with an illustrator, and we've come up with this book idea and applied it here. So this is a teaser, but this is the kind of thing you could make. So I have a book with all these Halloween things going on, but then I can scrub micro interactions inside, which is pretty fun. So like I've got a gargoyle that takes off there, but it's all possible with the platform. It'll all be just built in. Those eyes do follow. But yeah, that is it. If you haven't, start your journey, supercharge yourself. It's just pixels. This is the web platform. It's amazing. Collaborate, talk to each other. And yeah, the more you play around,
as you can see,
this guy sums it up
the
well.
more you around, the more you're going to find out.
Yeah, and that's what you need to embrace, really. We're here to help. If you want to come and speak to me at anything, yeah, my whole team, Chrome Dev, come and ask us anything. We're here to help. I know it's pretty overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline, but we're pretty fortunate in the time we're in. But yeah, that's it. Sorry if I've gone way over. And thanks for having me.